The situation took an even stranger turn when the young man shared something that shocked everyone. He admitted that his manager had asked him to provide services multiple times, claiming it was because the manager felt lonely and needed affection. That's why sometimes Mukesh appeared disheveled at work. He was often drained after spending hours fulfilling the manager's requests. Mukesh explained that these sessions sometimes lasted for hours, with some lasting up to 3 rounds. His manager insisted that if they were going to pay for the room, they needed to make the most of it. Mukesh didn't feel like he could refuse, so he just went along with it. Hey there, welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into another shocking real-life story that happened in our world. This one comes from Kolkata, a major city in West Bengal, India. Kolkata is known for being an economic hub in eastern India, and it sits along the Hooghly River, where one of India's busiest ports is located. But behind the bustling trade and economic success, there's a dark and unsettling story. It involves an operations manager at a fast food restaurant who took advantage of his male employee for his own personal needs. The young man, struggling financially, couldn't afford to refuse his boss's demands and found himself trapped in a situation he couldn't escape. So, what exactly happened in this case? Let's take a closer look. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and share this with your friends. The more, the better. Now, let's get into it. This is the story of Sadhna, a woman born in 1972. She was a bright graduate from Kolkata City campus and married Shankar in 2000. Together, they had 3 children. Shankar worked as an electrician at a government office. He's described as quiet, innocent, submissive, and generally very mild-mannered. On the other hand, Sadhna was more dominant in their relationship. Neighbors often said Shankar was the type of guy who would always obey his wife, never daring to argue, but despite this, he still had a lot of respect for her. He didn't push back, even though Sadhna made most of the decisions for their household. Since 2007, Sadhna worked as an operations manager at a fast food restaurant. Under her leadership, the place grew significantly, drawing in more customers than most of the other branches in the city. Sadhna was known for being incredibly friendly and sweet to customers, but her behavior toward her employees was another story. She earned a reputation as a tough, no-nonsense boss, blunt, cynical, and often quite harsh. Despite her tough exterior, she was still well-liked, mainly because of her good looks. Sadhna was raised by a father who was a former army member. He had a reputation for being disciplined and even a little violent, traits that Sadhna inherited. This upbringing likely influenced the way she ran her workplace. She kept her distance from her employees, especially the women, because she believed that being too friendly would lead to disrespect and make managing them more difficult. Some employees even disliked her because of her tough attitude, but she remained unfazed. At work, she kept things professional, never cracking a smile. However, at home, she was a completely different person. As a mother, she was gentle and nurturing, though still firm when things didn't go her way. To keep it short, in August 2016, 2 new employees, 18-year-old Sushma and 19-year-old Jyoti, were hired as waitresses. Both had just graduated high school and were eager to start working to support their families. Luckily for them, they quickly became popular with the senior staff, especially the male employees, who found them both attractive and fun. So, adapting to the job was easy for them, and their seniors taught them the ropes when it came to serving customers. But like most young people, they sometimes acted a bit too carefree or playful. This didn't sit well with Ms. Sadhna, their operations manager, who would often scold them. She'd call them out in front of others, criticizing them for being too flirtatious, lacking manners, and saying they were poorly raised. These comments were hurtful, and although Sushma and Jyoti were upset, they held back, knowing that pushing back could cost them their jobs. They were new, and the job market wasn't exactly easy to navigate, so they bit their tongues. It seemed like no matter what they did, they couldn't get it right in Ms. Sadhna's eyes. If they walked slowly while carrying food to customers, they'd be criticized for being too slow. But if they rushed, they'd be scolded for not doing things properly. If they were friendly with the guests and chatted with them, they'd be accused of trying to sell themselves. And the harsh words didn't stop there. It felt like they were always under fire from their manager, who only seemed to target them. The crazy part was, Ms. Sodna didn't treat the other female employees this way, only Sushma and Jyoti. Over time, this mistreatment brought the two girls closer together. What started as a simple working relationship turned into a strong bond of friendship, as they both became targets of their manager's harsh words. Here's how things went down. After a while, Sushma and Jyoti got tired of reacting to Sodna's constant nagging. They decided to let it all slide, one ear in, the other out. They focused on working hard and making money, and with time, the resentment they once felt began to fade as they matured. A few months later, Sushma started dating a new employee, a charming guy named Mukesh, who loved playing futsal. They kept their relationship private, and no one at work knew. Interestingly, Mukesh was being trained directly by Ms. Sodna herself. She seemed to adore him. He was her favorite. She often praised him for being quick to learn, hardworking, and attentive. Plus, Mukesh had the kind of physique she admired, toned, muscular, and sturdy. On the flip side, Mukesh began to notice some strange behavior from his boss. He confided in Sushma about how Ms. Sodna would send him flirty texts, full of compliments and subtle come-ons. She even invited him to spend the night with her at a hotel while her husband was away on business. Today's term? A staycation. But Mukesh wasn't interested. He came up with various excuses to avoid her advances. When Mukesh told Sushma about these messages, she was stunned and jealous. Of course, she shared it all with Jyoti, who burst out laughing. The same manager who used to scold them for being easy was now chasing after a junior employee herself. "Oh, so she's not so holy after all," Jyoti joked. "And she's offering it for free? No payments required? That's rich." A few days later, things took an awkward turn. Ms. Sodna spotted Mukesh giving Sushma a ride on his motorcycle. She confronted him right away, asking what was going on. When Mukesh admitted they were dating, her mood instantly soured. The once favored employee became her newest target. Instead of praise, Mukesh faced constant scolding, got ignored, and even saw his paycheck mysteriously docked for disciplinary issues. Things got worse when Mukesh, desperate to keep his job, finally agreed to meet Ms. Sodna at a hotel. He was terrified of losing his only source of income. Finding another job wasn't easy, especially for someone with just a high school diploma. College grads were struggling to find work, too. And so, without telling Sushma, he gave in to the pressure, not knowing how much trouble was just around the corner. When Mukesh and Sodna met, she didn't hold back. She told him straight up to break things off with Sushma. "Dating will mess with your performance at work," she said. "It'll distract other employees, too. If you need money, focus on your job first. Work is more important than a girl like Sushma." Then she got personal. Sushma and her best friend? Bad news. Don't let them ruin your life. Think about your dreams, and your parents, who are counting on you. She finished with a cold warning. "If I catch you with her again, I'll dock your pay or write you up." Mukesh, clearly rattled, began keeping his distance from Sushma. Confused and heartbroken, Sushma noticed the change. She didn't press him though. She figured he just wanted to focus on work. For 2 whole weeks, they stopped talking, even though they saw each other every day. Neither said a word, and their relationship hung in limbo without any closure. Then, about a month later, a coworker pulled Sushma aside with some juicy news. "You know your ex, Mukesh. He's been hanging out with her, the manager," he whispered. "They're all cozy, riding around together on her motorcycle, grinning like lovesick puppies." The rumors spread fast, making other employees raise their eyebrows and wonder what was really going on. That's when it hit Sushma like a punch to the gut. So this was why Mukesh had been avoiding her. It all made sense now. Ms. Sodna, who always seemed to have it out for her and Jyoti, must have known about their relationship and done everything she could to break them apart. Mukesh had even confided in Sushma once, mentioning in a tense, private conversation that he'd slept with the manager. Now it all fit together. Sushma, furious and hurt, told Jyoti everything. Her best friend didn't even hesitate. "It's obvious," Jyoti said. "She's been threatening him, cutting his pay, maybe even his job security. That's why he's doing whatever she wants. She's pulling all the strings." In May 2018, Sushma and Jyoti finally managed to get Mukesh to meet them at a friend's house for a serious conversation. At work, Mukesh kept avoiding them, and they were tired of it. Sushma insisted that he come clean about everything, especially whatever was going on with Mrs. Sadhna. The truth had to come out. Reluctantly, Mukesh confessed. Yes, he had distanced himself from Sushma on purpose. His manager had threatened to cut his pay or fire him if he didn't end their relationship. "It wasn't because I wanted to," he admitted. "It was all about keeping my job. If I got fired, there'd be no one to send money to my parents back in the village. I didn't have a choice." Hearing this, Sushma's anger boiled over. Why did Sadhna hate her so much? Why go so far as to ruin her relationship? What had Sushma ever done to deserve this? Then Mukesh dropped another bombshell. "She didn't stop at threats," he revealed. "She said she was lonely, that she needed affection. She made me serve her." His voice dropped as he explained how Sadhna had manipulated him into meeting her private needs. Sometimes it happened up to 3 times a night. She'd book a room, and she'd say I needed to make it worth the money. The girls were horrified. Mukesh looked worn down, his energy often drained. Now they understood why he always seemed exhausted and disheveled at work. He had been suffering silently, unable to say no. Their hearts full of pain and rage, Sushma and Jyoti decided they couldn't take it anymore. They both quit their jobs, walking away from the toxic workplace that had caused them so much misery. But quitting wasn't enough. Jyoti, fueled by a fierce sense of justice, soon came up with an idea to get back at Sadhna. Sushma was all in. Her heart burned for revenge. They wanted Sadhna to feel the same humiliation and shame she had inflicted on Mukesh. At first, they encouraged Mukesh to report Sadhna's abuse to the authorities. After all, what she had done was harassment, plain and simple. But Mukesh refused. "I'm too embarrassed," he said quietly. "And I still need this job. I can't afford to lose it." A few days later, Sadhna was caught off guard when her household assistant told her that 2 girls had come by looking for her. Since Sadhna wasn't home, the girls ended up speaking with her husband instead. They chatted for about an hour, and when Mr. Shankar mentioned their names, Urmila and Harini, Sadhna couldn't place them. She thought maybe they were just some marketers offering home loans. Even when her husband described the girls, Sadhna's mind went straight to thinking they were strangers. No one she knew had those names or characteristics. "Oh, they'll probably come back if they need something," she thought, brushing it off. But the girls never returned or even called, even though they had her number. Fast forward to early June 2018, and Sadhna's husband, Mr. Shankar, unexpectedly ran into Urmila and Harini, who, as it turned out, were really Sushma and Jyoti, in a cafe. The girls invited him out for dinner, saying they had a little business to discuss with Ms. Sadhna, though everything was resolved smoothly. Mr. Shankar noticed their change in appearance and asked about it. They casually explained that they simply liked to switch up their style. As they talked though, he didn't realize that he had been slipped sleeping pills, which made him pass out. Before he knew it, he was in a lodge room, stripped of all his clothes, and the girls were doing the same. They recorded everything with their phones, capturing their actions from multiple angles, as if Mr. Shankar were aware of what was happening. The 2 girls even went further, making it look as though they were engaging in inappropriate activities with him. Then they edited the footage and sent it to Sadhna's phone, triggering her fury. The next day, Mr. Shankar woke up alone in the lodge room, confused and disoriented, and went straight home. When he arrived, Sadhna was waiting for him, seething with anger. She showed him the video and pictures, explaining how she had encountered Urmila and Harini and figured out what had happened. Sadhna was absolutely convinced that her husband had been tricked. She didn't hesitate. She knew who the girls really were and went straight to their rented room. But when she arrived, they were nowhere to be found. However, one of their co-workers gave her their address, so she headed to Jyoti's place, only to find Jyoti there by herself. Sushma was missing. A huge argument broke out between Sadhna and Jyoti, drawing the attention of several other tenants. Things escalated quickly when Jyoti, fed up with the mistreatment, threatened to report Sadhna to the police for sexually harassing Mukesh. The confrontation turned physical. There was slapping, grabbing, and yelling. Suddenly, Sadhna pulled a knife from her bag and attacked Jyoti at close range. The onlookers were horrified. Jyoti, only 23, collapsed and tragically took her last breath right there. Sadhna tried to flee, but the residents stopped her and handed her over to the police. When Sushma heard the devastating news, she was in complete shock. Her best friend, who had only wanted to help her seek justice, was now gone, killed by the very woman they had been trying to expose. What began as a plan to report Sadhna's abuse and protect Mukesh spiraled into something far worse than they ever anticipated. They had prepared for a legal battle, confident their evidence would hold up against any accusations. But no one could have foreseen Sadhna taking matters into her own hands with deadly force. At the trial, Sadhna's lawyer argued that his client had been driven by overwhelming emotion. Seeing photos and videos of her husband in compromising positions had sent her into a blind rage. Sadhna felt humiliated and betrayed. What fueled her fury even more was learning that her former employees were behind it all, drugging her husband to stage the incriminating footage. Witness accounts from the lodge supported some of these claims. However, Sushma's testimony painted a very different picture. Mukesh bravely shared chat messages that revealed Sadhna's true nature. Messages filled with flirtation, manipulation, and veiled threats. She had frequently disparaged Sushma and Jyoti, calling them cheap, immoral, and untrustworthy, even though she had no proof. The prosecutor didn't hold back. "Where's your evidence that they were doing any of the things you accused them of? Did you actually see them selling themselves?" The courtroom fell silent. Sadhna had no answer. Even her own husband, Mr. Shankar, was stunned when it was revealed that she had been meeting Mukesh at hotels, seeking physical comfort while blaming her husband for being inattentive and dull. The truth hit hard. Mukesh explained how Sadhna had used her position to manipulate him, threatening to cut his salary or fire him if he didn't comply. He had stayed silent out of fear and financial desperation. In the end, the Kolkata City High Court in West Bengal delivered its final verdict. Sadhna was found guilty of premeditated murder for taking the life of her former employee, Jyoti. The judge handed down the maximum sentence, 20 years in prison. On top of that, she was fired from her position as operations manager, marking a harsh but fitting end to her reign of manipulation and cruelty. As for Sushma, she didn't walk away unscathed. Her actions, which involved drugging and staging Mr. Shankar in a compromising situation, were deemed misconduct and a key factor that set off the tragic chain of events. The court sentenced her to 9 months in prison for her role in the plot. Though her intentions had been fueled by a desire for justice, the method she chose came at a heavy price. Mukesh, initially suspected of conspiring with Sushma and Jyoti in their revenge scheme, was ultimately acquitted. He had no knowledge of the plan to lure Mr. Shankar to a hotel or the staged encounter that followed. His testimony, along with clear evidence, proved he had been a victim of manipulation and harassment rather than a willing participant in any crime. With all charges dropped, he walked free, though forever changed by the ordeal. What lessons can we learn from this story?